あ、俺、今スクリーンシェアできます？多分これでいけてると思うんですけど。俺、いけてる。今スクリーンシェアできます？危ねえ。できた。めっちゃドキドキするな。大丈夫ですよ。これミュートにしたままでいいんですかね？それで全部聞こえてますかね？はい。OK。なんでこれできないんだろう。なんでプレゼンタービューにならないんだろう。まあいいか。Okay, shall we start or shall we wait a couple of minutes? Okay. どっかからなんかエコーかかってません？少し。これ大丈夫か。はい。めっちゃ混乱してきたな。Okay. All right. All right. Let's get started. Note.
Recording in progress.
Okay, let's get started. Hello. My name is Naotsugu. I'm from Monash University in Australia, and thanks for coming to this AI Brain Symposium session number 5. The title of the session is Natural and Artificial Consciousness, and this is following our quite exciting and interesting discussion in the last session chaired by Tani-san. And today we have fantastic 4 speakers, Shimazaki-san and Yamada-san and Suzuki-san and Taniguchi-san. Usually you call them in the first name, but I'm following oyster manner today. Anyway, so to get you kind of oriented in what we are going to talk about, I want you to do a simple psychophysics task now. And please raise your hand if you think no to one of the each of the questions. Please. So number 1, are animals, for example, dogs, cats, mice, phenomenally conscious? What it means is that they are experiencing something. Those who think no, please raise the hand. Okay. One prominent speaker said no. Okay. Are insects similarly conscious? No. Okay. Many people start to say no. And then can AI or robots become conscious? Maybe not now, but in the future. No? Okay, all right. And then finally, can we find a way to test if an organism, including also artificial organism, be ever conscious from an objective manner? No? Okay, many people feel like maybe there's a way in the future. And the answer will be partially delivered by the speakers. So that's, without further ado, let's go to the symposium. First speaker is Shimazaki-san. Please.
Thank you very much for having me in this exciting session. So my name is Hideaki Shimazaki from Hokkaido University. One of the themes of our center is actually consciousness. But I myself is not really an expert in consciousness, but rather a theoretical neuroscientist who studied the spiking neuron data. But today I'd like to share my perspective from that kind of view. So let me get straight into the question. So we have received a stimulus that is integrated in our neural dynamics in the brain, and then logical thing happened that we have a sense of perceptual experiences that we are seeing the world. And so the question here is that can we quantify neural activity that is responsible for our perceptual experience? And there are a number of suggestions like IIT, or recently like entropy production is reported to be correlated with the state of the brain, like conscious or sleep or amnesia. So there may be a number of different measurements are required, but today I'd like to convince that perhaps seeing the neural system as an engine, like thermodynamic engine, might give us a hint to how to quantify it. So I'd like to start with this Bayesian view of the brain, which is probably the recurring theme of this symposium. But nonetheless, I'll go through this. So this is a model, the hypothesis that our brain has a model about the world. And so in a physical world, the stimulus is created in a physical process from some causes or some context. But we cannot access to this process, so what we have is a model of this. So it's called a generative model, which is composed of the observation part and prior. So observation is how this data, Y, is created by the causes, and the prior part dictates how this cause is generated from some context. And if you have this kind of generating model, then for a particular stimulus, you can guess what was the cause for that stimulus. That is just a Bayesian theorem, but in a Bayesian brain hypothesis, basically we identify these causes by neural activity. So then now this generative model, particularly the observation part, is actually represent how the neurons represent the stimulus of the world by combining the activity. This dictates that part. And then this prior part is a constraint on the neuron activity. Not all of the activities are possible. It is constraint. What constraint the neuron activity? The like nonlinearity of neurons or the connections. Those are constraints in neuron activity. So W here can be considered as a structure of the brain. So now, then we can form this posterior. Posterior is the population activity of neurons given a particular stimulus. So it's an evoked activity. On the other hand, if you don't have this condition on some particular stimulus, you have this prior activity. So this is the activity of neurons without any stimulus presentation. So this is considered to be a spontaneous activity. So in the Bayesian view of the brain, basically you have internal dynamics of the brain, internal dynamics of the spontaneous activity, and once you show some stimulus, then this distribution shifts and then results in this evoked activity. Okay? Now, this view is not spontaneously emerged. This view has been developed over the last 30 years in the experimental studies, actually, to investigate the relationship between the stimulus evoked and spontaneous activities. And the notable computational example is a linear generative model of natural scene that Monash actually showed yesterday with a nice example of Pietro Bacchus. So I reiterate this. So it's a model of the natural scenes. You take image patches and you make a generative model of this. First part is observation. You need to combine. So basically it is considered that each neuron has some kind of representation about image patches, which is called basis functions. And And you combine this activity and try to represent this. The neuronal activity is just a weight for these basis functions. Okay? So then we also, to construct generative model, we need also a prior. The usual choice is the sparse independent prior. So the neurons, we try to represent the world, the image purchased by a few independent neurons. And if you learn, under this constraint, if you learn these natural images, as Manish showed, that we obtain this Gabor patches. That model was, the X was real value, and it can take actually a negative value as well. So why not we have a spiking neuron, so we can replace this X to the spiking or binary, for simplicity binary neural activities. Nothing changes actually. You just combine these basis functions to represent the stimulus, either by, so this X is now either 1 or 0. It's just you select the base function node. And you also need a prior. But for the prior, basically, you have to have some kind of distribution for the binary patterns. The usual choice is called Ising model, but I'm not going to go into the details of this model. You have some kind of distribution for patterns. And then you can form the posterior, that is the neuron activity given a particular stimulus. And this actually becomes an Ising model again. But, and then this complex formulation, but don't worry about this. I just tell you that this part comes from prior distribution, and this part is coming from observation, something related to stimulus. So I just denote this part just H0, and this something related to the stimulus presentation is a stimulus-related activity large X. Then we can simplify formulation in this way. And basically, this part is represents the internal activity of neurons. And this is stimulus-related activity. And the beta and alpha just controls the magnitude of these two activities. Sorry that I mentioned, I forgot to mention that why do we need to introduce spikes? I mean, of course, because we are using spikes to do information processing. But mathematically, if you introduce spikes, you can naturally introduce the nonlinearity and also the interactions of these components in a nonlinear manner. So this part is a spontaneous activity, and by changing this beta, basically you can think that this part involves all of the neurons you are thinking about. And by changing the beta, you change basically the firing rate, spontaneous activity rate of the neurons. On the other hand, this part is related to dictates the neurons that is related to the stimulus activity. It's a subpopulation of this. So then, this alpha is just a proxy of the stimulus strength. So if you change this alpha, for those who are not in this X, they don't change firing rates. But those neurons which are in this stimulus-related activity, they increase the firing rates. And you get this sigmoidal function, and which is not surprising because this is a kind of multinomial extension of the logistic function. Now, you can then change the background activity, baseline activity, by changing this beta. And then, of course, neuron 4-5, it increases firing rate. But what happened to these stimulus-related neurons? Because it saturates at 1, so it got to shift. For particular part, you increase the firing rate, but it has to shift to the left. This is known as a gain modulation, a gain control, which is a very basic fundamental computation for neural systems that nonlinearly integrates two different signals. In this case, the internal and stimulus-related activity. And it's a very fundamental computation for adaptation of the organism. Now, I'd like to also point out that once you formulate in this way, you can compute the entropy of the system, entropy of the locked activity, and how this entropy can change by changing like internal activity or by applying the stimulus. You can formulate in this way. It simply says like a change of entropy is caused by change of internal activity or change of the stimulus part. But this formulation is known as the first law in thermodynamics. And this is not surprising as well because the formulation is the same. I mean, both physics, and here this distribution comes from under the maximum entropy principle. But basically, this part is kind of the force applied to the stimulus. In the case of physics, you apply the force or pressure, and if you change the volume of the gas, this is a work done to the system. Similarly, the stimulus apply the work to the system, neural system, and it changes entropy. Now, now that we have a reformulated neuronal population activity, so we want to model the dynamics of the recognition. So how does it look like in the real neural systems? This is a famous figure from Victor Lame's group, Professor Lame, and showing the latency of the neuron activity to the visual stimulus. So at about like 30 milliseconds later, after the onset of the stimulus, the V1 will be activated. And then there is a feed-forward seek, and it propagates along the temporal cortex, and about 100 milliseconds it reaches to the end of the temporal area, like entorhinal cortex. So this means that if you record from like early visual cortices, the activity after about 100 milliseconds, so because there is a lot of feedbacks here, this the activity after 100 milliseconds may contain the modulation from higher cortical areas, and may contain more global or contextual information. This is maybe some of you already know, but this is a famous figure of the figure ground separation. So here you see the figure of line, which is perpendicular to the lines on the background. But if these two are aligned, basically this figure disappears. But for if you record from a neuron whose classical receptive field is located here, these conditions are identical. And if you look at the response of the V1 neurons, this starts to fire after 30 milliseconds, and then peaks at here, and there is no change between these two conditions. The difference appears after 100 milliseconds. If you have a figure ground separation, then you have a sustained activity. But if not, you have a faster decline. Okay. Now this late modulation seems to be important for our the animals' perceptual experiences. So if you show some figure ground separated image, but sometimes the monkey fails to report the presence of this figure. In that case, although there is a figure is presented in the stimulus, when they fail to report, they lose this delayed modulation part. So this part seems to be correlated with the perceptual activity of the perceptual experiences of an animal. Similar thing happens for attention. Attention also acts in a delayed manner. This is a V4 neurons by Reynolds as a study, and it acts. It increases the fine rate by attention, but it happens later in time after about 100 milliseconds. And in this study, actually, they showed that this modulation acts as a gain modulation. In fact, the non-linearity of neurons. If you increase the contrast, it increases the fine rate. But if you have attention, it increases in fine rate. But because of saturation, it shifts to the left. So this kind of a higher order cognitive function is also explained by the very basic computational framework of gain modulation. Now, we want to model this kind of neuronal dynamics. So we can model this by using our model. So by manipulating, by changing this alpha, we can represent this stimulus evoked activity. It increases in fine rate and then decreases by changing this alpha. But here I just keep this background activity constant. Now, if you change this background activity, you can do the gain modulation, nonlinear modulation of this neural activity. But we want to do this only at later in time. So in the beginning, it's close to 1. But then after that, you induces the gain modulation. So in the beginning, firing rate doesn't change so much, but later it augments the firing rates. Now, if you have such kind of a neuronal dynamics, and if you draw this in a kind of phase diagram, like a y-axis is this beta, and this x-axis is the average activity of all the neurons, which includes actually stimulus-related neurons. So if you increase, if you have a stimulus response, you also increase the average activity of all neurons increases, and so it increases and then decreases. If you don't have gain modulation, it just forms a line. But if you have a delayed gain modulation, first when you increase the firing rate, it's close to no gain modulation. But if we want to apply gain modulation when it goes back in a delayed time, then you have to, in this case, decreasing beta is actually applying the gain modulation. So when you go back, you decrease beta. So the dynamics forms a cycle. And if the neural dynamics forms a cycle in this phase diagram, basically we know that it acts very much similarly to the thermodynamic engine. And this area quantifies the amount of delayed gain modulation, this pink part, but not just the change in the firing rate, but more proper measure by the entropy change. So basically, this is very much similar to thermodynamic engine. In a thermodynamic engine, basically, you extract the work from the temperature difference. In this case, in our case, basically we have a modulation, gain modulation of all populations, and some of the neurons, subpopulations, also modulated by this. And this can be contributing representing the stimulus feature. Okay, so some of the part of this gain modulation is used for stimulus related activity, which is kind of the excess work extracted from the system. So basically
4 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to finish. So basically the cycle area is more precisely the cycle area actually indicates how long the stimulus is retained by the aid of this feedback modulation. So if the cycle area is larger, if the neuron keeps the stimulus-related activity longer by modulation. And so this is related to the discussion done in yesterday, right, like Xiaojin 1. So the retaining memory longer time was caused by the longer time scale of this gain modulation, background activity, or top-down modulation. Otherwise, you cannot form this kind of cycle, and also you cannot retain the stimulus in a longer time scale. So it's with the aid of this longer time scale feedback control, feedback modulation, you can retain the stimulus for a long time. And you can quantify how efficiently you can retain the information, very much similarly to the thermal efficiency of the engine, like this. So, how to quantify this internal modulation? So far it's like a toy model. So how can we actually quantify from the data? So not only for that purpose, but we have been developing the so-called state space Ising model for more than 10 years. And this method allows us to estimate the population dynamics dictated by Ising model, the binary patterns in a time-dependent manner. And if you apply this to the many neurons, we can simultaneously then we can visualize the dynamics of the neuronal interactions, and also associated more global property of the system like free energy entropy or heat capacity. So by using this space techniques, I believe that we can actually quantify the part of the the delayed gain modulation using the entropy measure. Although I haven't developed the precise method for that, but we are aiming. So as a summary, So I didn't explain very much, but the gain modulation is ubiquitously observed in nervous system as a mechanism to adapt neurons nonlinear response function to stimulus distributions. And the Bayesian brain provides a statistical paradigm for the gain modulation that integrates observed stimulus and prior knowledge. The delayed gain modulation, the stimulus response via recurrent connections, is modeled as a dynamic process of the Bayesian inference that integrates observation and prior with time delay. Okay? And if you have a time delay, this process forms an information theoretic engine, a mathematical analog of heat engine in thermodynamics. So this view allows us to quantify the efficiency of retaining the stimulus information by the gain modulation in terms of entropy changes of neuron activity. This quantity is expected to correlate with the perceptual capacity of animals according to the experiments. And that state-space item model of neural population we are developing is, I hope, is a promising tool to quantify this perceptual capacity from actual neurospectrum data. So thank you very much.
Okay, let's take question from the floor. Is there any question? Yes, Monash.
You brought up attention as one of the kind of motivating examples at the beginning, and that maybe highlights the fact that stimuli are very complicated things. You're experiencing many inputs at the same time, and many of these gain phenomena, particularly attached to attention, are then selective. So would you think about, here you seem to just be modulating a single beta that influences everything, but presumably that wants to be a pattern that modulates subsets in some way.
Yeah, exactly. So,
so then I guess that was the main comment / question, but I guess the H naught also contains interactions between different neurons. So there's going to be some spreading of influence because of connections within H naught, even if you don't have direct input from the other term, I can't remember what you call capital X. Even if you don't have direct input from capital X, there's going to be some spreading. So how do these two things, I guess, interact? How can you be selective for the stimulus for capital X when you've got coupling to other neurons through H?
Okay. So first of all, this H naught includes a part of this stimulus-related activity. Otherwise, there is no interactions, and this interaction is nonlinear gain modulation manner, and that's one thing. And he also mentioned that you also mentioned that the actual so this is a very toy model just to play around the neural dynamics only by 2 parameters. And in real neurons, we have to have the individual activities, and if there is a strong overlap, you have more how do I say, the effect of the modulation, of course. So I mean, you have to you can think about how to learn this more effective modulations by overlapping these two features. And I think this is related to the optimal development of optimal internal model in the brain that says basically the prior and the posterior activity becomes closer and closer over the development that was Peter Marquez was proved. So I think it's kind of related to that.
Okay, maybe then I'll ask a follow-up question related to the previous question. So it seems like you are pretty careful in the end that this thermodynamic engine kind of concept would be correlated with a perceptual capacity. And it may mean conscious or non-conscious, I think. But to me, it seems like this gain modulation mechanism seems to be quite close to attention. Yeah. And it from the neuronal point of view, this kind of activity itself can be evoked by even subliminal stimulus that we cannot see. But last 20 years of the research, psychophysics and fMRI and things like that have shown that attention can modulate also unconscious processing. So would you predict that there is any kind of difference between the unconscious modulation of attention or conscious modulation of attention in this case?
I was expecting that kind of question from you, but I don't have an answer. In fact, I have to tell you that I started this model as a model of attention. And as I said, I'm not an expert in consciousness, and I encountered Lame's recurrent theory later, and I thought that, oh, this is it, so why not include this? So maybe, but more carefully speaking, probably there would be a difference from attention and even attention and more perceptual experiences. Yeah, but I need more.
Okay, Kobe-san.
Thank you very much. Great talk. So, I'm pretty much interested in the feedback modulation of the gain, gain feedback modulation. So, this is a quite naive question. Do we need to have some feed-forward gain modulation, or do we need to think about the feed-forward gain modulation in addition to this kind of?
So this model actually, for the neural system to work as an engine, I mean, you need a delayed gain modulation, and it's agnostic about feed-forward delayed connections. That is also possible, and it's just a statistical model and agnostic about such mechanism. And I always said feedback connections because it seems to be more attractive, but it doesn't specify.
So Tsuchiya-san mentioned some kind of attention mechanism. So it seems for me, some kind of bottom-up attention process might be correspond to this one, and some feed-forward fashion gain modulation could be correspond to the some top-down attention. Is it correct, or
Feedback modulation would be more corresponding to
bottom-up modulation?
top-down.
Is that a top-down?
Yeah. I think so. I am considering that this background level of the neural activity is modulated from the higher order cortical area, and
Okay, thank you.
to promote the stimulus activity to be forwarded to the next step.
Okay, thank you for the speaker. And the next speaker is again from Chain Hokkaido University. Keisuke Suzuki is going to present us some quite radical approach to the phenomenology. He terms it as a computational neurophenomenology. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jason. I'm Keisuke Suzuki, also from Chain in Hokkaido University. And today I'm going to talk about how to use deep learning model to study phenomenology. Yeah, it's kind of, I put computational phenomenology in the title, but it's kind of ongoing project. We aim to this at some point, but let's get started. So I think most the researchers studying consciousness target on normal, healthy adult, like normal consciousness. But we know there's a different type of consciousness, altered state of consciousness, dream, trance state, hypnotic states, psychedelic experience, out-of-body experience. Those bit atypical experience is known in long time, and we know like so many different ways to induce this kind of state of consciousness. And sometimes people studying consciousness say they are the level of consciousness and content of consciousness. Level of consciousness is something like awaking or sleeping, coma, and the content of consciousness is the things appears in your phenomenal mind. But this altered state of consciousness seems like not fall within these two categories, which it's not about level, they're not losing consciousness, but it's not just the content changed. And it's kind of interesting for me, and maybe for many other people, it's kind of possible modes of conscious mind. And it's an interesting era that there's actually resurgence of a psychedelic research recently. So, but we have two different approach for this kind of altered state. One is of course empirical approach, scientific approach, and another word. It's more objective and quantitative, so people scanning the brain when taking some psychedelics and they compare the brain. But we also have more experiential approach, which more subjective and qualitative, so like artists drawing the picture, what they actually experience under the psychedelic. This kind of visionary art is drawn by these people, or sometimes they are like when they have some clinical condition. Okay, and of course, when we say like scientific study of consciousness, people more focus on this empirical approach. But in the philosophy, we have the area called phenomenology. And I'm not a phenomenologist, so I just briefly explain this. But this is started by Husserl and later by French philosopher Merleau-Ponty. And they try to describe conscious experience without making any assumptions. It's a raw experience. In other words, the phenomenology study of lived experience, and they focus on the flow of dynamics and flow of the experience. And original phenomenology, I believe, is quite descriptive, but more recently, a lot of attempts also done to like bridge between the phenomenology and empirical study. So, for example, I think that this is the most popular one, neurophenomenology, the more like first-person approach. So sometimes they use a meditation technique to be a kind of the mindset to get into your consciousness in a bit different way from the normal awakening state. And they, for example, describe when they meditate, these kind of dimension can be drawn by analyzing their phenomenal consciousness. Similar approach, it's more like second person approach. This is more like an interview technique, so people actually interview the participant in a certain way to, again, dig into the mind. And maybe formal approach is one of the other, naturalizing phenomenology. So there's some like mathematical, I think integrated information theory is one of these approaches, starting from phenomenology of consciousness. The altered state of consciousness is really broad, but in this talk I'm more focused on the visual aspect of altered state. This is taken from this paper. It's, our visual experience also has many forms, like awakening, even the normal vertical perception to like optical illusion or misperception, and some of them are actually categorized as a hallucination. You know, people see something not physically there, and in some clinical conditions, people see the really like photorealistic image without any backgrounds. I'm coming back to this point later. And to study that, of course we can see the brain, but now we have deep neural network which can create the image almost looks like real. So for example, this is the GAN, Generative Adversary Network, it's invented in 2014, but it's now, not even now, it's 2019, but for me it's almost identical to the real photograph. Of course, if I see the detail, there's a tiny slight difference, but like, with a glance, I can't really distinguish between these images generated by AI. So I think it's time to actually we can generate or synthesize image which kind of simulate these altered phenomenology using this kind of model. So we use this deep convolutional neural network to do this, and actually deep convolutional neural network is not generative model, it's just, I think other people said, but it's purely straight, purely feed-forward network, means the information just going through from the bottom to the top. And I don't need to maybe introduce, explain this detail, but deep convolutional neural network is inspired by the neurovisual system in the brain, and it means it's a highly layered. Interesting part is that this hierarchical future extraction is automatically done. So this kind of lower layer of the network process in line and different angle, like a visual, early visual cortex, and higher layer of the neural network processing like parts of the body or face. And used to be it's designed by the engineer, but now it's all kind of, in a sense, it's emerged from the neural network by giving them a lot of data. And so these are just a neural network to categorize, classify the image into the category, but to know, this is purely artificial neural network, so it's not try to model the actual brain, but some people, of course, try to compare the actual brain and artificial neural network, and they found they compared the dissimilarity matrix between fMRI data and this artificial neural network. They found so IT area is normally processing this kind of object. It's more similar to the higher layer of the artificial neural network, and the other way around is also true. So lower early visual cortex is more similar representation compared to the lower layer of artificial neural network. So, I'm not saying this is actual brain, but it's some similarity or parallel between artificial neural network and the actual biological brain in terms of some structure or function. And to visualize these future space in deep neural network, sometimes they invent to the technique to visualize the latent space. And one of them is called activation maximization. And here I just put deep dream, but it's basically the same thing. So the idea is there's a feed-forward neural network. We put the image as an input, and it's processed toward the category on the right side. And when we train the neural network, we normally use back propagation to changing the weight between each unit by gradient descent. And once training is done, we just put some image, and it's quite fast processing, just answer the level. And this activation maximization or deep dream is doing similar way to training, but rather than changing the weight, it directly changing, optimizing the input image itself. So in the result, starting even from the random image, it turns into the image representing or like reflecting the higher layer of the neuron. So I didn't actually press. So it's a Van Gogh picture. It's turned into the like doggy face, and it's interesting. It's not just the dogginess from as an object level, but you can see all the detail of the texture of the dog appears in this image. So this is already known. A lot of people in Google already implement this in 2015, 16. And what we did is we just applied this technique to 360 video footage. So this is the video I captured in the Sussex University campus. I think it's Marketplace, and I just applied the things to this 360 video. So you can see a lot of dog face, and maybe this is I have a show video. So this is actually the 360 video, and when we we actually use the head-mount display, so people can actually move your head to look around the scene. And a lot of people ask why there's so many dog faces. If you want to, you can ask, but yeah, just I think one reason is a lot of human face is a bit similar to the dog, so it turned into dog normally. Yeah, so this is what we made, and this is just demo, but we want to do some scientific research, so okay. We took some questionnaire using this altered state of consciousness button, and this is actually used for assessing the psychedelic experience using the actual psychedelic substance. So this is a radar plot. The blue line is the rating after watching this hallucinatory video, compared to this gray line, which is after watching the original unmodified video. And you can see like there's some difference, significant difference for some items. And interestingly, we also compare, this is a between study, but we got data from the Imperial College. They actually administrate the psilocybin. It's a magic mushroom, basically. And they also asked people to rate this same questionnaire. And it's kind of interesting. We found a kind of similar pattern between just watching simulated hallucination and actually taking psilocybin. And
7.
7. So I just starting with just a like deep neural network. But what is actual neurocomputational mechanism under visual hallucination? I think there's still a lot of theory, but I think one consensus is, of course, top-down prior, strong top-down prior can create this kind of conscious content without any central input. So for example, this is kind of another computational model in 2010. Like this kind of simulated hallucination is of course enhancing the top-down processing and just ignore the sensory input. And also there's some empirical evidence that this is a patient in Lewy body dementia. So these patients actually see a lot of visual hallucination in their daily life. And those patients actually weigh more in prior information when they do this kind of the visual discrimination task. But interestingly, the psychedelic affect brain in a bit different way. So, for example, this is a reverse model by Robin Carhart-Harris and Carl Friston. They claim the psychedelic actually relaxing the top-down prior and freeing up the bottom-up information flow. So it looks like even people see the existing stuff, but there might be different mechanisms creating the hallucination. And I just go into a bit more speculation. So actually, when I start this study, it's just because a lot of people say this deep dream image is quite similar to what people experience in the LSD. But why there is this marked similarity between the deep dream or hallucination machine image and like psychedelic experience in general? And there's some article investigating this future space of deep convolutional neural network. And interestingly, they say deep dream algorithm basically isolates effective cause of visual categorization. So it means, this is not the generative model to mimic the sensory input. It's just process the information only required to classification task. So this is kind of a similar concept of this adversarial example in machine learning area. So the adversarial example is something like this, even with really small noise, this image of peak for us is classified as error for this deep convolutional neural network. So this means like this kind of noise have some meaning for the AI, but not for us. And I think this kind of stuff, the deep dream image is kind of similar. We can see some pattern of eye or like bugs, but we don't see this as a real insect. But for AI, this is actually most important information to classify this image. So I think this psychedelic effect of the visual phenomenology could be caused by this effective cause of classification task. It just appears to your conscious phenomenology. And this is kind of resonate with the old theory of psychedelics called filtration theory. This is proposed by Aldous Huxley. He's an author of The Doors of Perception. And he basically said there's a double inhibition for psychedelic drug effect. So he basically said in our normal awakening state of consciousness, some kind of bulb, cerebral bulb, he said, is inhibiting the lot of rich information in the brain to be leaked into phenomenology. But for somehow some mechanism, the psychedelic actually inhibiting this inhibition mechanism. So this right side rich information just appears in our mind. But his theory is quite anecdotal, and it doesn't really specify what it is that brain filtering out and what is actually coming out when taking some psychedelic. So I just speculate, maybe in this line of the story, we can say this effective cause for purely for classification in your brain just leaked when you take some psilocybin or any psychedelic. So now I'm not going to this part, but this is ongoing study. We try to simulate different type of visual hallucination. One is, this is the same as our hallucination machine. So psychedelic hallucination is generated by the same way to just relaxing the top-down prior. But pathological hallucinations such as Lewy body dementia or Parkinson's disease, maybe it's more like a GAN type of architecture that actually try to simulate the sensory input directly. So yeah, this is an ongoing study, and we actually started some interview to the patient who often have visual hallucinations. So it's again just an ongoing result, but we are kind of interested in like how perceptually veridical their hallucination is, because we know like psychedelic hallucination is more unrealistic, but people in this clinical population watching the hallucination is more, they report more realistic one. For example, I just pick up some from the interview result, and one older person actually saw a real-size London bus going through her room. I don't really imagine how it's like, but it's not like a miniature bus, but a real-size bus going through the house. But she can describe all the detail of the bus. So, and she only know this is not real because of the size and in the context. But otherwise, the phenomenological is quite convincingly real. So these hallucinations in these neurological or clinical causes is totally different from the psychedelic hallucination. So take-home message. First, our hallucination machine allows us to experience the output of the model, which used to be just too small or not very rich to experience as a first person. But now we have XR technology and these deep neural network to make it enable to do that. And by using this kind of technique, we can maybe go into this computational neurophenomenology, which basically using computation model to simulate conscious phenomenology or phenomenal characteristic rather than like objective performance of perception or cognition. So this is the last slide. I think people still say like, oh, this is just you showing these things, it's not about the actual consciousness. But I recently found this thing, I just quote from this Adam Safron's, I think private, he didn't put this into his paper, he said, but I like this dialogue between mysterious and non-mysterious. So basically, it's basically a kind of other way to say to the hard problem consciousness, but rather than consciousness, they use this genetic model, the output image of the genetic model. Why is it something that it looks like to be the output layer of genetic model, so like this hamburger or dog? And yeah, because it was trained after data with certain statistical regulation that can be reduced when the model is inverted. But of course, people don't understand the deep neural network, asking, but how can these images so rich and a lot of texture and color? But these are actually just a statistical feature run by the neural network. But of course, people continue asking why this looks like something. But it's basically all algebra underneath. So, it's kind of, at some point, people understanding machine learning can maybe understand Qualia in certain, part. That's my another take-home message. Thank you very much.
two questions, but that's very related. So are there any hyper-attention in visual hallucination? If so, attention could be very much related to the precision structure, right? So then, what do you think about that idea?
So I think, actually there is a patient watching hallucination, they only appears when they attend something. So it actually related with the attention.
Then it could be precision. Then the person saying that something wrong with the precision structure, higher level is visual hallucination, right? So it's something connected.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Yeah, thank you very much for the informative talk. I would like to know regarding these architectures that you presented, and if you're familiar with Dimitri Triptami EMT experiences, they usually have very strong hyperbolic or hypergeometric things that probably don't have any prior or strong priors. And would these architectures be able to reproduce such features?
So I think that's the same effect. So without any prior, people start seeing the future of the lower visual cortex. So, but I feel like DMT is a bit different from other psychedelics, the psilocybin or LSD, in terms of their experience. So I'm not quite sure it's actually the same things or not.
So the point of view from generation of these architectures, it would rather include.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. But I'm not going to the different type of psychedelic technology yet.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Just check the Zoom audience.
So, do you think any, yeah, okay, yeah, do you think any relationship between with the dream experience, like with your hallucination model?
Yeah, I'm not actually thinking about connection to the dream, but yeah, of course, I think some people say the psychedelic experience is quite similar to dream, but people dream when you're awake, so could be, but yeah, that might be a bit different mechanism when you're sleeping.
Yeah, so this my question is actually related to Taniguchi's question, because in a dream, like if you try to focus things, you see really realistic.
Yeah.
You feel, or that's kind of illusion, I think.
I think
So,
the one thing that's lacking in this model is more like reality monitoring part. So when you dream, actually the prefrontal activity is going down, and when you seeing the lucid dreaming, it's going up. Means in the dream you're actually suppressing the reality monitoring, and maybe that's why we see something real, because we cannot judge what is real or not. So maybe it's related, because some people seeing the visual hallucination, they can't, especially these heavy body dementia people, they also losing the reality monitoring. They don't really know what is real and what is imagination. So yeah, could be.
Okay, thank you again for the speaker, Keisuke. Our third speaker is Makiko Yamada. By the way, I forgot to introduce our own project name. It's called the Qualia structure, supported by transformative scientific research. And this is our kind of a logo marked T-shirt, and she's also wearing this, and that tells us that she's also part of this project. Keisuke, can you? Yeah, all right. All right, great. And she's going to talk about the Qualia structure projects, and especially on color Qualia structure.
Thank you for your introduction. I'm Makiko Yamada from National Institute for Quantum Science Technology, and the title is New Basis of Color Qualia Structure. So, as Tsuchiya has introduced, we are working together to see how the brain creates qualia. And then this is Transformative Research Area B. And Tsuchiya-san is the leader of this research area, and I am measuring brain activity related to Qualia, and Dr. Oizumi-san is extracting information structure from brain activation data to match with the psychologically driven, psychological based Qualia structure. And today I'm going to introduce the study of the brain activity measurement, which is still ongoing, so I cannot conclude anything yet, but I will present the progress that we have. But before doing so, let me explain a little bit about this Qualia structure study, how we approach to the study of Qualia. So what is Qualia? Qualia is a quality that we subjectively feel or experience. For example, it's that redness of red. We know that we have these experiments, and some other people also will have the redness red. And for instance, there is an apple, and these two people say they see red apple, but their perception might be quite different, but we don't know from their report, only from the report. So Qualia is something that cannot be fully expressed in the language. Therefore, it is very difficult to share with others or objectively demonstrate and verify. Therefore, this is very difficult question, but we came up with very new idea to approach Qualia, how to measure Qualia. This is Yoneda lemma. Yoneda lemma is one of the theorems in the category theory of mathematics. The idea is that when there are two things, A and B, and the relation between A and the other thing, and the relation between B and the other thing are identical, then the two things A and B are essentially the same. So if we apply this lemma, Yoneda lemma, we may be able to quantify Qualia. So Qualia itself cannot be compared, as I said. Person's red is red and B is red. But if we measure the red and Qualia of red with other Qualias and see how they are related to each other, and we see here's B's red is how they are related to each other, then we can see these Qualia are same or not in terms of relationship with other Qualia. This is the approach we are going to apply for our area. So in our Qualia group, first Tsuchiya-san is extracting and constructing the Qualia structure from subjective report, and I am measuring brain activity and then construct Qualia structure from brain data. And Oizumi-san is extracting from the brain data, extracting information structure from brain data, and see how this brain data can be transformed to explain the conscious Qualia structure. This is how we approach it. But today I'm just going to focus on this part. How the brain-based Qualia structures are related to the subjective report-based Qualia. How are they similar, and which brain regions are involved? But again, this is a very preliminary finding, so I don't have the strong conclusion yet. So this is the task design. We have 9 colors presented, each one. From these colors were extracted from HSV color space. And the trial is like this. So there is a reminder, and then after the reminder, there is a target. And then we ask participants to compare these 2 colors and rate the similarity from -4 to +4, dissimilar and similar at a 8-point scale. But sometimes there is so there are 2 types of queue here before the target: report queue and no report queue. In case of report queue, subjects are asked to rate, but when no report queue is presented, subjects does not do anything, just perceive the target. And we did this trial, 328 trials in total, and we recruited 31 participants. And here is the subjective report result. From the subjective rating, we construct the similarity matrix. So this dark black indicates dissimilar rating, and white is similar rating. And if these 2 colors are same, so this line is white, indicating that they are just the same. So in case of this, red and red are compared. And if it's red and pink are compared, it's a light gray, so it indicates around here a little bit similar. But if it's dark black here, red and blue and green are rated very dissimilar. And from this dissimilarity matrix, we can extract 2D arrangements using multidimensional scaling analysis, so we can know the distance between each other. And this is the 31 subjects averaged data, and indicating the circular subjective expression of color qualia. Red and pink are near, but green and red are far in distance. And we are interested in color perception areas, and this is not voxel pattern analysis, just the general linear model. And then when the participants perceiving the different colors, brain activations are observed in these regions. So V4 and V8 are activated. So we used these regions as ROI for the following analysis. We have applied representational similarity analysis introduced by Keisuke, and we scan fMRI, and we extracted activity patterns, for instance, from V4 here, and these are voxel patterns for each color obtained from V4. And we compare each pair, we calculate the correlation, and we compute. Then we compute this similarity between for each color, for each pair, and we make a matrix here. So dark color indicates dissimilar patterns for these colors. Like for instance, red and greens are very different in voxel patterns. And from representational dissimilarity matrix, we can make 2D arrangement. But today I'm going just to talk about RDM here. And we want to know if and how much the subjective-based RDMs are correlated with the brain-based RDMs. So we see the correlation between the matrix. And this is the small, like R is 0.03 and 0.02, but it seems that in representation simulating analysis, it is going to be very small. For instance, this is the study of one. They looked at the visual word form area, and they did they compared behavioral ratings and also box pattern analysis. And the correlation between behavioral and brain-based discriminant matrix around or less than like 0.02. Here, this is the orange bar is the one that I'm talking. So so in this study, they have presented Chinese character and they asked participants the semantic rating, and their behavior and brain activities are related to this amount. And in another study, this is 11th study, and they used international vector picture system, and they asked the participants to judge the pictures based on their subjective emotional experience, so that the behavioral matrix is obtained from subjective experience. And brain patterns are correlated in insula here, and then correlation is around 0.01, and this is the one they have found for the behavioral and brain activities are matched. So these correlations might not be very different from previous studies, but this is the average data obtained from 31 subjects, and this is also data from 31 subjects. So now I have looked at the individual correlation between these metrics, and here the result. Each plot indicates individual data, and some people have a stronger correlation, but others are not. And if we take the mean, we cannot see the significant difference from 0. And we also looked at the different brain regions, not just color area, color perception area, but subjective experience area such as insula and ACC. And here again the individual data and correlation varies a lot between individuals. So I think from these data, there are individual differences rather than commonality between individuals. And these individuals that we are now focusing on. And we have looked at how these individual differences are associated with the subjective experience of something else. So for instance, here its anxiety level is correlated with the insula correlation. Correlation between subjective and brain-based RDMs in insula are correlated with state trait anxiety inventory. So those people who have high anxiety have higher correlation between subjective patterns and brain patterns, but not correlate. No any other correlations were found for age or hue test, which is a color perception acuity test. And then also among these four rows, only insula was the region that was associated with the mood or affective difference of individual. So this is so now I will go a little bit more in detail, because in our task, as I said previously, we have two cues. One is to report, and the other one is not to report their subjective experience. And this is the result from 31 subjects. And we found that when we ask report compared to no report, but we see the same colors in both cases. There are differences in these brain regions. And then visual regions are activated for each cases, but different regions. But especially when we are asking report the similarity of the colors, parietal lobe are more activated compared to no report condition. And also middle frontal gyrus is also more activated for report condition. So parietal lobe is known for the attention effect, but we don't know yet. But these regions are not as observed for no report condition. And in case of middle frontal gyrus, it's known that color category is conducted in these regions. So let me introduce this study conducted by Bard. So in their study, they used 4 colors, green to blue, and some participants usually categorize this is green and these 3 are blue. And there are different level here in blue. And when the participants see the within the same category, the brain activity patterns are associated with this hue similarity in visual area. But when the subjects are presented in different category, not visual area, but middle frontal gyrus are activated. So this study indicates that middle frontal gyrus and middle frontal cortex activation is important or related to color categorization. And in our study, when we report the color, these middle frontal gyrus activated. This might be related to color categorization in our study too. And interestingly, when no report, so when we compare no report versus a report, no report condition recruited more activation in anterior insular, posterior insular, anterior cingulate gyrus, and middle. These awareness or emotional regions are more active for no report condition, even though this study is nothing about emotion. So just passing the colors.
2 minutes.
Okay. So these are again, so report and no report, and there are correlations. These are correlations between the subjective report and brain-based matrix. And here again, there are no differences among the region of interest. But what we found was, we found only in no report condition B and only in B8 and insula correlation with affective experience, like anxiety level, was significantly correlated. So in B8, subjective based qualia and brain-based qualias are highly correlated for individual with high anxiety participants. It's the same for the insula. And V8 is known for color experience region conducted by he did color after image, and V8 is activated for color after image only in V8, not V4. So participants see illusory color there is a gray screen, but they see like purple and blue, like that. And in Insula is known for emotional experience or somatosensory processing and something like that, but also it's known for the visibility processing. Actually, there are a lot of studies indicating coincidentally insula activation in visual and auditory tasks, and now it's considered that this area is not as a byproduct, but processing something about the visual or auditory perception beyond sensory motor and emotional processing. And anxiety, in case of anxiety, it's known that increased arousal to all state and also towards the environment. And actually, visual areas do respond more compared to healthy subjects in case of anxiety patients. So for instance, if the two stimuli are continuously presented, second stimulus does not recruit a lot of activation in visual area, but in case of anxiety patients, this less activation was not observed. So they perceive the second object as something like a new object, and high activation in visual areas are observed, and also hyperactive insula are known for anxiety. So these results may suggest that alertness and steadiness may be related to the representation of color code in the brain. And then this is the satellite result that because I have shown just 4 rows, and we did like, maybe there are other brain regions associated with report-based and no-report-based brain patterns associated with behavioral. And this is the average, but we see a lot of individual differences like this. Here. So we are going to find these individual differences based subjective experience, how the subjective experience is associated with the brain-based Qualia at individual level in future. But for the summary of my talk, I had 2 questions: how similar are the subjective brain-based color Qualia, and which brain regions are involved? And what I have shown that the uniqueness of subjective experience in the brain, correlations between subjective and brain-based RDMs indicate individual differences rather than commonality between individuals. And V8 and insula might be important area for perception, narrow experience, such as like alertness and steadiness might be related to the representation of color code in the brain, but these are still preliminary results. So for the next step, this is I have just showed correlation, but for the next step, we are going to go how much we can decode from brain patterns to subjective report, and we are going to manipulate the brain patterns using like by manipulating dopamine level in the brain. And then finally, we want to transform, we want to find how the brain patterns are transformed to subjective report. Okay, so I have the rest of it. Yes, this is the conclusion, and this is acknowledgement. Dr. Hirao and Miyamai from my group have conducted this study, and also I have a lot of comments and advice from our core structure members. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Is there any question? Yeah.
Thank you. Great talk and great details. I wonder, you had some emphasis on like ensure and under-simulate activity on non-report trials, but I wonder if it's because of like a goal task kind of evaluation. So like they're asked to report, but sometimes they're asked to refrain from reporting, and that's kind of explains the correlation with anxiety because they're either goal task and inhibitory task. Do you see this as alternative or?
So your question is, so in case of high anxiety participants, they may have more inhibitory.
Yeah, they were polar, or they had to be more effortful in inhibiting reporting on non-report.
Therefore, they may have more actual subjective pattern. I see. Yeah, that might be one answer. We don't know yet because we just see the correlation between the level of anxiety here. So anxious people are more highly aroused, as you said. So in case of those participants, they may have more attending to visual information compared to non-anxiety participants. Yes, I think so too. Yes.
Any other question? If not, maybe then can you start preparing for the next talk? Okay, the next one is the last talk in this session, and Taniguchi-san is going to talk about a bit different approach towards consciousness, but more from constructive approach, symbol emergence dynamics. Can you change the Zoom? No, yeah, okay. Can you start presentation? So the title of the talk is Consciousness and Symbol Emergence Systems.
Okay, can you hear me? Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm Tadahiro from Ritsumeikan University and Panasonic. Today's title is Consciousness and Symbol Emergence Systems. But to be honest, so my talk has that I will not much talk about the consciousness in this talk explicitly, but I believe this talk is somehow very much related to the consciousness studies. Okay, so the main topic of this talk is about this kind of semiotic communication, linguistic communication. So actually, interestingly, I found that Kanai-san talk in this morning, very similar. The slide was shown. So actually, when we speak something to others, so actually we can express something. So by using some language, some words, but actually we cannot inspect each other's brain states nor transmit meanings directly. So, but we can somehow become able to communicate. This is a very fundamental question, and sometimes it's called mystery of the semiotic or linguistic communication. So how can people share signs and categories and form a symbol system, for example language, without inspecting others' minds? Also, relationship between the teacher and learner are not fixed in this society. So language is changing over time. So actually this kind of limitation is also common to studies of consciousness and Qualia, I think, as well. And this kind of study have been conducted
in language evolution and emergent communication and symbol emergence, etc., etc. So in this talk's title, so the keyword symbol emergence systems is involved. So what is symbol emergence system? So this is a kind of descriptive model of our language communication. So here, I use the term symbol in the sense of the Persian semiotics. So in Persian semiotics, symbol is defined as a triadic relationship between sign, object, and interpretant. And people in the AI or cognitive science tend to consider the symbol as a kind of discrete token. But from the viewpoint of semiotics, it's a bit naive definition. So we are following this kind of definition. Anyway, so human, infant, or even adults learn and form some categories of concept through the physical and social interactions. So the sensory motor, based on the sensory motor information, we can form kind of internal representations under the constraints of some linguistic interaction with others. So this can be regarded as a kind of representation learning in modern AI. But that's not language, that's not symbol. So we need to generate the signs or language to communicate. So, but first, we can actually generate arbitrary signs. But if others cannot understand, interpret the sign, so there is no semiotic communication. So kind of negotiation happens, and we can form the kind of rule of communication, a rule protocol, through this kind of semiotic interaction communications. And through this kind of dynamic process, so some sort of emergent symbol system organized in our society. So this is a kind of bottom-up process. But at the same time, this kind of symbol system, it is often called code or rules. This gives some sort of constraints to our communication. As far as we follow the rule that implicitly embedded in the symbol system, we can communicate using symbols. This is what's happening in our society from the viewpoint of the symbol emergence systems. So finally, the kind of symbol emergence system, emergent symbol system is organized. Okay? So, and the important thing is that this total process is a kind of self-organizational process. And symbol system in the society is also formed in a bottom-up manner. So, keep this kind of model in our mind. We have been conducting many researches called symbol emergence in robotics using robots. So in this video, this is research conducted almost 10 years ago. So in this video, the robot grasped the object and get the haptic information and shook it to obtain the auditory information, and looked at it to obtain the visual information. And using some sort of generative model, so the robot integrates such kind of multimodal information. At the same time, the robot obtained the speech signals from participants, and try to find the words from speech signals in an unsupervised manner, and integrate them, and found the vocabulary, and kind of the multimodal object concept, object category were formed. So this is actually we have been conducting this kind of studies for more than a decade. And this kind of approach is resonating with the kind of generative view of cognition the free energy principle, and predictive coding, and the world models. So then actually the paper on the right is a kind of outcome of a co-authored paper produced after the previous, this AIBS symposium. So anyway, so we have been keeping this kind of view in our mind, but to be honest, what we have been conducting, and also the most AI studies have been conducted, is just an individual learning pattern. And what we really need is how can we model the organization of emergent symbol system. So how can we model and theorize and reproduce and grasp the symbol emergence in a society? So the process of symbol emergence should be modeled as a kind of self-organizational process, a bottom-up formation of an emergent symbol system. So actually, this kind of study has been conducted more than 2 or 3 decades. So the classical approach has been taken by the very famous one, Luke Steele's group. So, so most of such kind of studies are based on language game. So typically, naming game-based approach has been conducted. And interestingly, from like 2016, in the new lips of ICML and Qualia community, so this kind of study rebooted somehow, and now very popular. And because of the success, based on the success of the deep reinforcement learning and multi-agent reinforcement learning. So, but anyway, so we are taking a bit different approach. So we want to follow a bit, roughly speaking, with this approach, tended to use the kind of discriminative model-based approach. But we want to follow the generative model-based approach. So actually we want to model this kind of phenomena as a bottom-up formation of the emergent symbol system, and we want to have a kind of clear theoretical basis of the optimization. What this kind of phenomena optimize in our society? That is the question. And actually, the sharing sign is not only the purpose. So actually, the sign system and the categories are mutually dependent. So such kind of phenomena should also be modeled, expressed. So actually, we proposed the new kinds of naming game. We call this Metropolis Hastings naming game recently. So let me explain the kind of outline. The first, the 2 robots, speaker and listener agent, observe the object and infer the internal representation. So after that, communication phase. Speaker tells the name of the object in a probabilistic manner. The listener determines if it accepts the name with a certain probability, depending on its own belief state. And if the agent accepts the name, the agent will update their interval variable. And after that, they alternate their role. This is very simple, the naming game. But let me explain some theoretical background of this naming game. So let's consider a kind of the integrated probabilistic generative model that integrates the perceptual system of 2 agents with a single variable. The PGM probabilistic generative model for an agent is considered for a categorization system or representation learning system. And please consider decompose it into 2 probabilistic generative models, representing the 2 agents respectively. Then consider the metropolis Hastings algorithm. That's a type of Markov-Chain Monte Carlo. And about this shared latent variable. And letting the posterior distribution of WD conditioned by the agent A's internal variable as a proposal distribution of naming. So sampling process is regarded as kind of naming process. And let's calculate the acceptance probability based on the metropolis Hastings algorithm. The acceptance probability is become like this. And this is but just a kind of ratio between the, how much the listener believe think the name is appropriate or not, compared to the name the robot, the agent originally thought, considered. So, and if the acceptance decision is made with the probability the naming game is mathematically equivalent to metropolis Hastings algorithm of this integrated model, this model. So this means it is guaranteed that the signs are shared and the categories are formed among the agents to approximate posterior distribution. So this has some sort of theoretical guarantee. So this is the overview of the naming game. This is it looks very simple one. And okay, so I would like to show an example result. So we had several other format studies, but this year we proposed a new one. So this will be this is for the symbol emergence based on real image data. So actually, for an agent model for categorization, this is representation learning from real image. For this, we use Gaussian mixture model and VAE. And we define this kind of integrated model, inter-GMM VAE. This is a kind of variant of multimodal VAE with categorical latent variables. And actually, the decentralized Bayesian inference can be achieved by the metropolis Hastings naming game. If the two agents play a naming game, this means the Bayesian inference is performed. Okay, this is a very simple example experiment. So we use the MNIST dataset. The agent A gets the MNIST data as an observation. And agent B observes the MNIST data rotated by 45 degrees. And they play the naming game. And this is a comparative method. And give sampling the top line. This directly estimates the WD, assuming this the integrated model. Okay, this is the result, and this shows that the MH naming game could perform a good clustering, and that enables the agent to share signs, and as a theoretical, prediction suggests. And interestingly, that in compared non-communication setting and the MH naming game settings, even the clustering performance, i.e. the representation learning performance, was improved, even though there were no supervision signal. There was no so actually the just communication could improve not only the emergent communication but also the representation learning. So a bit more the realistic data, the fruits data set. The similar thing is observed. And interestingly, so okay, let me explain what semiotic communication is described in this model. In what way? So actually, the semiotic communication is modeled as a kind of ancestral sampling process. So recognition process or naming process is described as a sampling from posterior distribution and by the speaker agent. And recalling process, interpretation process is regarded as modeled as a kind of the sampling from this posterior distribution by the listener. So this is a kind of the result, and in image naming game, these are the image, kind of stereotypical image generated from each science. So image naming game, they could share the meaning of the words. But interestingly, all acceptance situation are condition. This means the agent believes what the other says always. Image naming game condition, the agent often rejects what they say if they don't think it's not true. So if all agents accept what the other said, so the clustering categories could not be formed appropriately. So this is interesting. And also, another interesting aspect of this model is this communication is regarded as a kind of cross-modal inference. So this is, as I mentioned, this is a kind of a variant of multimodal variational autoencoder, and inferring another observation from one observation is considered as a cross-modal inference. But here, this is the modality belongs to different agents in this setting. So somehow, this communication is considered as an interpersonal cross-modal inference. Okay, that's almost all of my story. So we want to introduce the new formulation of the emergent communication as Metropolis Hastings naming game, and the model the symbol emergence. And actually, we show that the symbol emergence it will help the representation learning performance in a bottom-up manner. And also, this can be extended to any agent setting. So I think that this kind of view gave us new understanding of the function of symbol emergence. So if we regard these agents as a group or one organism, this is actually performing a predictive coding or representation learning as a multi-agent system. So I think this kind of understanding extends our usage of free energy principle or predictive coding, and now the kind of the emergence of semiotic communication is under the umbrella of such kind of generative view of cognition. So we have many way of extensions, and it's also important to evaluate and analyze that if actual human conduct this kind of naming game or not. And yes, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any question from the floor? Yeah.
Thank you for interesting talk. I'm sorry for if this is a trivial question. I think the symbol, the way of expressing symbol is not unique, and there can be many ways of expressing the symbol at the same time. And for example, when we think about apples, the shape and the color are slightly different in details, but we can see the same apples or concept of same, but we can name
thank you very much. Thank you very much for the great question. Actually, in this research, I verified our concept with the simplest model in some sense. So this has a huge generality theoretically. So actually here, the world is sampled from the probabilistic distribution. And currently we use Gaussian distribution, and actually the prior is categorical distribution. And we assumed some categorical discrete symbols. But that can be easily extended to the more complex one. And in addition, you can easily attach some conditional variable and contextual information. So, but even if we extend in such a way, so this kind of general view of GIT model will not be changed. And maybe maybe mathematically some trouble may happen in future, but I think the total story itself will be preserved. I think. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very impressive things and I think it's a very new, like kind of by pre-nationalization, then common symbol appears among, so that is quite a new idea. So however, I have to say a little bit critical. So that is because it can be, it goes well, I think. It is expected once you plan like this. But one thing I expect you, can you explain something like a more emergent things, like if you read about for example, some people say that gesture is a prerequisite. Gesture things, prerequisite. Then after symbol, those things. Or you can, some animals, like a monkey, a chimp, they cannot have a symbols yet, right? Language. So what's the difference between human and if you can explain by this model, then it's really great, right? So the answer what I'm saying. So yes, of course, if you unset this way, it goes in this way, right? So,
Sure. Thank you very much for the And actually, the language is based on many prerequisites. And actually, what you mentioned first is the kind of the syntactic bootstrapping with the action, the learning. Yeah, that's true. But actually, it's related to the syntax, the origin of syntax. And basically, this is not nothing to do with the syntax part. So more semantics part. And that is, this does not contradict to such kind of idea, and we can make use of it as well. And another thing is, second question is second comment is about. Thanks very much. So that's also important. But I actually think that I don't rarely use a language emergence, but symbol emergence. So I think some part of capability of symbol emergence is owned by other animals as well. But relatively, the human has a huge adaptivity in semantics. So actually, like honeybees have kind of signs, but they cannot invent new signs in the developmental process or daily communication. So that's a critical difference. And this maybe I think insects cannot do this. That's my current comment.
There was a quick question from the chat audience. How does this apply to more than two agents?
Actually, now the paper is under preparation, and actually the first it looks difficult to extend, But using some trick, we found that this can be extended to Energence setting. So maybe preprint will be released in 2 or 3 months.
Okay, great. So thank you, Taniguchi-san.
Thank you very much.
And we'll go to discussion session. If Taniguchi-san, you can stop sharing the screen and enter into Zoom. Yamada-san and Taniguchi-san is not there, so if you can join the Zoom, yeah, and Yamada-san. All right, so first maybe I'll start with kind of prepare the topic for this simple discussion session. Okay. So one of the topics was that can we ever know what other people are experiencing? And this kind of relates to the way Yamada-san, Makiko set up the question of this Qualia. Is my red the same as your red? And Taniguchi-san's kind of approach is, in a sense, potentially at the level of the language addressing this issue. But do you have any comments on this? Number one question, Yamada-san or Taniguchi-san?
Okay, sorry. So from my side, as I have said, basically I'm wondering, and I have no clear answer to this currently. But the important thing is when, as I mentioned in my talk, without how to say, the direct observation of others' experience, we can know many things. How to say, more things than we expected. So actually the other language I showed. So actually the direct observation of others' mind does not require, I think. So maybe the discussion of Qualia structure is also something like that, maybe. But yeah, that's my comment.
Okay. Yeah, Suzuki-san?
Can I say something? It's really interesting. Yamada-san's talk is about, when you see a color, certain color, you can find certain network of the brain state. I just wonder, maybe if we combine with a technique to train people, one person's Korean relationship to other people's network, do we experience same Korean by doing that?
I think it's one way to experience the Qualia, but we are also considering that our perception is not fixed always. It fluctuates even within the individual. So this fluctuation, like brain response is also fluctuates. It's not always activated when even we see the same colors or. So it depends on the context that we measure, and then this is called the contextuality, and the measurement is always influencing the content of experience. So maybe one way is to decode and technique is one way, but it's not enough, I think.
Do you think that one-to-one mapping from the brain activity and Korea, or different? It could be. I mean, I don't know if it's possible, but it could be multiple mapping between.
Many to many kind of mapping. Yeah, at least with our current preliminary results, the correlation coefficient is very low, right? and there is a huge inter-individual variance. So the next step, one of the next steps that we are planning to do, I'm now kind of representing Masafumi Oizumi, is to extract what's relevant within this brain activity, and hopefully to kind of purify this quite noisy neural signals into something that is actually really correlated with the color Qualia structure. But yeah, it was quite striking that it's the V8 activity is more correlated with the state anxiety. Yeah, that's, I don't know how to interpret that, or but something like that should be probably removed first, or maybe it's actually the essential thing of the color experience. I don't know really.
That's also thinking maybe in-cell activity, maybe especially non-report paradigm activity of insurance, maybe just feeling of perceptual feeling of colors. So, I don't know. I feel there's some dissociation between similarity judgment and just focus on color. I think there is some feeling, not just perception. That's a kind of core of conscious Qualia. That's my belief. But yeah, that's something. Yeah, the result of the interactivity is really interesting.
I also thought that the plasma is more like simulating the emotional experience and again. So in case of the report and no report condition, in case of no report condition, we don't do anything, but we maybe mentally simulate their experience.
But actually, initial might be not just emotional feeling, but every kind of feeling, subjective feeling. So feeling doesn't need to be affected.
Yeah, that's yeah, that I really agree.
Some philosopher, Ned Block, has been critical about no report paradigm, not because no report paradigm doesn't confirm what people are experiencing, but he's more worried that even under the no report condition, people are actually cognitively, actively doing something which is not controlled. So no cognition paradigm is necessary, or something that he is talking, and that's possibly similar to some of the phenomenologists talking about pure experience or direct experience. But maybe it's a difficult state of the mind to attain. Okay, if there's any comment or question from the floor, otherwise maybe we'll go to the next topic. To ask Shimazaki-san about this third question. Maybe your modeling kind of your approach is a part of this constructive approach of AI and brain researchers to work together to better understand consciousness, or maybe second one, understanding of the consciousness in humans or animals contribute to AI technology, or vice versa. What's your opinion or take from your study? Number 2 or 3, whichever you want.
Whichever, okay. So then maybe first, maybe both, then number 3 is basically AI and brain research work together. I mean, I myself is using big machine learning technology to understand population activity, so this greatly helps to actually uncover hidden statistical structure. So, but so obviously fruitful, and the working together with actual brain researchers is always fun, and of course I need input from real consciousness study people, and so for the second part, I mean, can understanding of consciousness in human and animals contribute to AI technology? Yeah, I think so. I mean, right now we don't have a definition of the consciousness, and people are searching for it. My attempt is probably one of them. And then if we dissect the important activities related to the consciousness, then for the machines we can expect the same thing, and then we can defend we can prevent people to deceive the computing machines, like providing illusions or unconsciously physical experiments existing will be very, very useful in the future of the AI.
And in particular, during your talk or after your talk, I pointed out the potential distinction between attention and consciousness, right? And there are, at least, there are lots of empirical evidence where we can manipulate attention, and then we see or not see the difference in consciousness, or we manipulate consciousness or visibility of the things and then see whether attention actually changes or not changing. So there's this double dissociation paradigm. And once we kind of accept momentarily that attention and consciousness could be supported by different mechanisms and also serves a completely different purpose, it seems like through this symposium since yesterday, attention has been serving in many different areas of the AI quite effectively, especially transformer technology has been benefiting a lot, right? And one of the papers that we wrote, there we kind of propose the analogy of the attention as an analyzer and then consciousness as a synthesizer. And if that's the kind of the right analogy, do you think that this synthesizer kind of idea is not really implemented in AI, or maybe Ryota's shared latent kind of space may be similar to this consciousness as a synthesizer kind of idea, but do you have any idea, Taniguchi-san and Shimazaki-san?
I mean, I actually, honestly speaking, I'm not so much, I don't know the difference between consciousness and attention, and you have to teach me. From theoretical point of view, what I'd like to do is actually try to explain the things in a higher order cognitive functions as a very basic mechanism, like adaptation mechanism of the gain control. I believe that the organism, to survive, we have to get a lot of information, and the individual, the peripheral mechanoreceptors, whatever it is, are always adapting to the environment, changing the environment. And there's a lot of gain modulation mechanisms in a multiple and cascading way. I believe that is an organism, and I believe that the attention or consciousness should emerge from such a basic building blocks. So there may be differences, but I want to think it in a continuous way. That's
okay.
all I can say.
All right. Do you want to say anything about any other topics? Or any comments or questions from audience is also fine.
I actually liked back to the Yamada-san things about the Yoneda's lemma relation structure, and you talked about color things. If you remember, yesterday I talked about the pick red and the touch red and hit red, something blue, something like that. In that case, it's going to be, I showed a two-dimensional grid. Could we expect to see something like that in the fMRI, even though the person subject different, but the same relational structure preserved in the fMRI? Is it possible? I just thought.
Thank you for it. Yeah, I think it's possible that we can. Yeah, that's good. That's a good experiment, I think.
Yeah, that's what we hope, but so far the fMRI activity seems quite noisy. Yeah. All right. Any other question or comments? Otherwise, we already passed 10 minutes, so we wrap it up. Thank you very much.
So we will start the next session as planned from 3:30.